Human leaned close to steady an alien girl, but the tradition she mentioned was beautiful, not bold. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. Chris Taylor stood in the middle of the crowded cultural exchange hall, feeling slightly out of place in the midst of so many alien species. His role as a human ambassador for Earth wasn't glamorous, but it was necessary. He had been assigned to help bridge the gap between humans and the many alien races that had now become part of the Galactic Council. He had seen many strange things in his travels, but none were quite like the being standing in front of him. Zara was tall, her long silver hair flowing like a river of moonlight, her bright green skin glowing softly in the artificial light of the hall. Her eyes, large and violet, were filled with curiosity as she studied him. Chris had never been this close to a member of the Lenara species before, and he found himself captivated by her grace and the mysterious aura surrounding her. Zara had been assigned to assist Chris during his visit, a guide of sorts to help him understand the complexities of their culture. As they walked through the hall, Zara's graceful movements caught the attention of several other alien delegates, their eyes following her as she passed. It wasn't just her physical beauty that drew attention. There was a quiet power about her, a calm strength that seemed to radiate from her with every step. Chris noticed that Zara was more than just a guide. She was also a scholar, deeply knowledgeable about the ways of her people. As they approached a grand display of Lunaran art, Zara paused and turned to him. "This piece," she began, her voice smooth and melodic, "represents the unity of our people. It is a symbol of balance, not dominance. We believe in harmony, not in the assertion of power." Chris, intrigued by her words, leaned a bit closer, trying to understand the deeper meaning behind her statement. Zara noticed his curiosity and smiled faintly. "You humans are strange in your ways," she continued, her gaze softening. "You use force to protect what you love. We, on the other hand, use beauty to protect what we value." Chris, a little confused by the subtle contrast she had drawn, nodded slowly, trying to absorb the weight of her words. "What do you mean by beauty to protect?" he asked, genuinely curious. Zara's expression turned thoughtful. "Our traditions," she said quietly, "are not about bold displays of strength or aggression. They are about quiet gestures, the delicate balance of everything around us." Chris furrowed his brow, still processing what she meant. He hadn't expected such an answer. Most of the cultures he had encountered valued power in some form, whether through might, technology, or influence. But Zara was different. As she explained her people's ways further, Chris began to realize that Lunaran culture didn't see strength in the same light as humans did. For them, it was the smallest of actions, like steadying someone in need, that spoke volumes. Zara's hand reached out as she steadied herself on a rocky platform. Chris instinctively stepped closer to assist, his hand gently touching her elbow. The moment their hands met, something unspoken passed between them. It wasn't just about offering help. It was about the way their two cultures, so vastly different, had intersected in that brief touch. Zara's eyes met his, a flicker of something deeper in her gaze. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice carrying a weight of unspoken gratitude. It wasn't the kind of thanks he was used to hearing. It wasn't bold or loud, but instead, it was beautiful. Chris realized then that perhaps the traditions of the Lenara people weren't about what was done, but how it was done. The quiet elegance of their culture, the way they valued gentle care and harmony, left him with a sense of awe. In that moment, Chris understood something fundamental about Zara and her people. They weren't interested in grandeur or force. They found strength in subtlety, in beauty, in the smallest of gestures. He could feel his respect for her grow, and in the depths of her violet eyes, he saw a flicker of respect for him as well. He had offered her help, not out of a sense of duty, but because it was the right thing to do. And in doing so, he had unknowingly embraced a piece of their world. As they walked on, Zara's voice broke the silence. "You see, human, the tradition I spoke of is beautiful, not bold. And perhaps, There is more to strength than we have yet understood. As Chris continued to walk alongside Zara, he found his mind still wrapped around the complexity of her people's ways. The subtle elegance of her culture had left him with a sense of wonder, and the more he thought about it, the more he realized how much there was to learn from her. Their conversation shifted from the intricacies of Lunaran traditions to a more personal discussion about their respective lives. Zara, for the first time since they had met, seemed to let her guard down slightly. "You must find our ways, strange," she said softly, her eyes focused ahead as they navigated through the Hall of Art. Chris glanced at her, his mind racing with thoughts. "No, not strange. Just different," he replied, choosing his words carefully. "But different in a way that's beautiful." Zara's lips quirked upward in a small smile. "We see beauty in things that others might overlook." Chris nodded, taking in the meaning behind her words. It was clear that for her people, beauty wasn't just about aesthetics. It was a way of life, a guiding principle that defined how they interacted with the world and each other. "Tell me more about how you grew up," Zara asked, her curiosity piqued. Chris hesitated for a moment, not sure how much of his past he should reveal. He had grown up in a small town on Earth, far removed from the intergalactic affairs that now dominated his life. But something about Zara made him feel at ease, like she was someone who would understand, even if she couldn't relate directly. "I grew up in a small town. Nothing like this," he said, gesturing to the grandeur of the palace around them. "I was always told that the most important thing was to stand up for what you believe in. But looking at your people, it seems like there's another way to be strong." Zara glanced at him, her violet eyes searching his face. "And what do you think of our strength now?" she asked. Chris smiled, appreciating the way she framed the question. "I think it's more about understanding than just force." Zara considered his words carefully before speaking again. "Our strength comes from our connection to each other, our bond with the world around us. It's not something you can see or touch, but it's there, and we believe it's the most powerful force we have." Chris took a deep breath, feeling a shift inside him. For the first time, he felt like he understood a little more about what Zara had been trying to say. He had always believed in strength through action, through taking charge, making decisions, and standing firm in the face of adversity. But now, he saw that there was a different kind of strength, one that came from harmony, from connection, and from finding balance with the world. "I see now," Chris said quietly. "Your strength, it's not about doing everything yourself. It's about being part of something bigger, isn't it?" Zara nodded, her eyes reflecting a depth of understanding. "Exactly. We are not alone in this universe. We are all connected, and that connection is what gives us the strength to face anything." As they continued their walk through the palace, Chris felt a sense of peace settling in his chest. He had come to this exchange to learn about the Lunaran culture, but what he hadn't expected was to learn something so personal, so profound about the nature of strength and connection. Zara had opened his eyes to a new way of seeing the world, and for that, he was grateful. As they reached the end of the hall, Zara paused and turned to face him. "I think we've talked enough about my people," she said with a soft smile. "Tell me more about your Earth. What does it mean to be human in your eyes?" Chris thought for a moment. To be human means to keep trying, even when the odds are against you. It means standing up for what's right, no matter how hard it is. Zara's gaze softened, and for the first time since they had met, she looked at him with something more than curiosity. It was a look of respect. "I think you and I are more alike than we realized." Chris smiled, feeling a warm sense of connection between them. There was still so much they didn't understand about each other's cultures, but in this moment, it didn't matter. They were both learning, both growing, and that was all that mattered. For the first time in a long while, Chris felt like he truly belonged in this vast, interconnected universe. As the day progressed, Chris and Zara continued to explore the halls of the Crimson Palace, their conversation shifting from culture to philosophy, from the deepest parts of their histories to the most personal thoughts. Chris couldn't help but feel that he had discovered something new within himself, something he hadn't expected when he first landed on this distant world. Zara, in her quiet and composed manner, had shown him a different way of looking at the universe. She had introduced him to the idea that strength didn't always come from dominance, that beauty could hold as much power as aggression. As they walked through the lush gardens of the palace, the atmosphere between them felt less formal and more human. The cool breeze from the planet's twin moons swept through the trees, carrying the scent of alien flowers, and for a moment, Chris felt at peace. "Do you ever wonder," Zara began, breaking the comfortable silence, "what it would be like to live without boundaries, without these traditions that govern our lives?" Chris thought for a moment, unsure of what she was asking. "Are you asking if we ever feel trapped by our own beliefs and customs?" Zara nodded, her violet eyes reflecting a deep, quiet sadness. "Sometimes," she said softly, "I wonder if there's more to life than following the paths laid out for us. What if there's another way? A way where we can truly choose who we are, without the expectations of our people weighing us down?" Chris understood her words more than he had anticipated. "I think every person feels that way at some point," he replied. "We all have expectations, whether they come from our families, society, or even ourselves. But it's up to us to decide what to do with them." Zara looked up at the sky, her expression thoughtful. "You're right, of course," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But what if our choices lead us into something we cannot control? What if, by seeking freedom, we lose everything we hold dear?" Chris could hear the uncertainty in her voice, the weight of her words hanging in the air between them. He didn't have an immediate answer, but he understood her fear. It was a fear that many people, regardless of species, shared. The fear of the unknown, of stepping outside the comfort of tradition and facing the consequences. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder, offering reassurance. "Sometimes, we have to take risks," he said. "We have to trust that the things we lose will be worth the things we find." Zara's eyes met his, and for a brief moment, Chris saw something in her gaze, a quiet understanding, a connection that went beyond words. She smiled softly, her earlier hesitation fading away. "You are a strange human," she said, her voice lightening with a hint of amusement. "You speak of risk, yet you stand so firmly in your beliefs." Chris chuckled, relieved to see her humor return. "I guess that's just what we do. We take risks, but we stay true to who we are." Zara nodded, her expression softening as she looked at him. "I can see that now," she said. "You remind me of a legend from my people, a human who stood alone, but who never wavered, no matter the storm around him." Chris felt a surge of pride, though he wasn't sure if he deserved such a comparison. But as Zara looked at him, there was something in her eyes that made him believe that maybe, just maybe, his presence here meant more than just fulfilling a diplomatic role. Perhaps, through his own actions, he was helping Zara, and her people, see a different side of humanity. They continued to walk through the garden, the weight of their conversation lingering in the air, but now, it felt like there was a shared understanding between them. They were no longer just a human and an alien, representing their respective species. In that moment, they were simply two individuals, connected by the simple, yet powerful truth that they could choose who they were, regardless of the expectations placed on them. And for the first time, Chris felt like he wasn't just an outsider in this vast, unfamiliar galaxy. He felt like he belonged. As they continued to explore the palace grounds, the atmosphere between Chris and Zara shifted into something more comfortable, yet still charged with the lingering curiosity they both shared. Zara, having opened up more than Chris expected, now seemed to invite a deeper connection. She led him toward a quieter, more secluded area of the garden where the soft rustling of alien trees filled the air. The sky above was a deep, twilight purple, dotted with stars, and the atmosphere felt almost surreal, as if they had entered a world that was entirely separate from the bustling civilization inside the palace. Chris admired the way the garden blended advanced technology with nature, creating a harmonious environment. "Do you always spend time here?" he asked, looking around at the ethereal beauty. Zara nodded, her expression softening as she gazed around. "I do," she replied. "The gardens are a place where I can reflect, a place where I can be alone, yet not lonely." There was a certain peace in her voice that Chris could sense. She had a quiet strength that came from her connection with the world around her. He could see why this place meant so much to her. "I understand," he said, feeling the weight of her words. "Sometimes, it's good to be with nature, away from everything." Zara looked at him, her violet eyes meeting his in the soft light. "It is," she agreed, pausing as if considering something. "It's also where I find clarity. It's where I remind myself that the world is bigger than any one person or problem." Chris nodded, his mind processing the wisdom in her words. He had always believed that the world was full of challenges, obstacles to overcome, but Zara's perspective made him think about things differently. Maybe, he thought, the world wasn't something to conquer, but something to understand and live within. Zara, Chris said slowly, do you ever feel like you have to carry everything? Like all the expectations, the roles your people expect of you? Zara didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped closer to one of the trees, her fingers brushing against the smooth, iridescent bark. I do, she said quietly, but I've learned to let go of some of that weight. I think the hardest part of leadership is knowing when to act and when to let things unfold naturally. And that's something I struggle with. Chris could see the vulnerability in her eyes, something that had been hidden behind her composed exterior. It must be difficult, carrying so much responsibility, he said. Zara smiled faintly, but there was no self-pity in her expression. It is, but it's also a part of who I am. I've learned to accept it. She turned to face him fully now, her gaze more intense than before. And I think that's something I've seen in you as well, Chris. You carry yourself with purpose, even when you don't have all the answers. Chris felt a warmth spread through him at her words. He wasn't used to being recognized for his inner strength, especially not by someone like Zara, whose people were known for their quiet power. Thanks, he said simply, unsure of how to respond to such a compliment. The moment lingered between them, and for a brief second, the world seemed to pause. Zara took a small step forward, the space between them almost non-existent now. Sometimes, I think we try so hard to control things, she continued, her voice soft but firm, that we forget to let them breathe, to let them grow on their own. Chris looked into her eyes, seeing the depth of her thoughtfulness. And sometimes, we forget that the best things come when we stop trying to force them. Zara's smile widened, and she reached out to touch his arm gently. Exactly. The connection between them felt stronger now, an unspoken understanding that went beyond words. In that moment, Chris realized that despite the differences in their cultures, in their backgrounds, they had both learned to navigate their own worlds, carrying the weight of their responsibilities and yet finding moments of peace in between. As the soft light of the twin moons bathed the garden, Chris felt a sense of peace settle over him, a feeling that he had not expected when he first arrived on this strange world. Zara had shown him that there was more to strength than he had ever known, and in return, he had shared his own strength with her. They stood there together, not as an ambassador and a guide, but as two individuals who had found something meaningful in each other's company. As the days went by, Chris and Zara found themselves spending more and more time together. What had started as a formal exchange between a human ambassador and an alien guide had blossomed into something deeper, a bond built on mutual understanding and respect. Zara's once formal demeanor had softened, and Chris felt more at ease with each passing day. They had explored the city, the gardens, and even engaged in lengthy discussions about their respective worlds. Zara had opened up about the complexities of her people, their philosophies, and their customs, while Chris shared the intricacies of human life, its chaos, beauty, and imperfections. One afternoon, as they sat in a quiet corner of the palace garden, Chris looked at Zara, his mind turning over the conversations they had shared. The air was warm, with the faint scent of alien flowers drifting in the breeze. He had grown accustomed to the rhythms of this world, to Zara's quiet presence, and the strange sense of peace that seemed to surround her. Zara, Chris began, his voice gentle but filled with curiosity. What is it that drives you? I mean, beyond the traditions and the responsibilities of your people, what do you really want from your life? Zara turned to him, her violet eyes thoughtful as she considered his question. For a moment, she remained silent, as if weighing her words carefully. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft but firm. I want to know that I've made a difference, she said. I want to feel that I've used my position, my abilities, to bring something good into the universe. But sometimes, I wonder if I am just following a path that was chosen for me. Sometimes, I wonder what it would be like to choose for myself. Chris nodded, understanding her conflict. He had always believed that the choices we made defined us, and yet, he knew how easy it was to feel trapped by the expectations of others. He could relate to her desire to step outside of the roles that had been assigned to them both. I think everyone feels that way, at some point, Chris said, his tone warm with empathy. The key is realizing that you can choose. You can always choose. Zara's lips curved into a small smile, but there was still a hint of doubt in her eyes. And what if the choices we make are wrong? What if stepping outside the path leads to something we cannot control? Chris didn't have an immediate answer, but he could sense her fear. It was a fear that many people, no matter their species, shared. The fear of the unknown, of making a choice that might not lead to the outcome they desired. He leaned forward, his gaze steady and sincere. That's part of it, he said. Making a choice means taking the risk. That it might not work out. But it's also about learning from it, growing from it. We can't control everything, but we can control how we respond. Zara met his gaze, her eyes searching his face for something. An answer, perhaps, or reassurance. After a long moment, she nodded slowly, a small sense of resolve building in her expression. I suppose you're right, she said, her voice softer now. We can't control everything. But maybe it's enough to just try, to choose with the best intentions, and let things unfold as they may. Chris smiled, feeling a sense of relief in her words. It was the first time he had seen her truly embrace the idea of letting go of control. It was a powerful moment, one that felt like a turning point. That's all any of us can do, he replied. Try our best, and trust that the rest will follow. The breeze picked up slightly, and for a moment, they sat in comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Zara's voice broke the quiet after a while, her words filled with a new sense of purpose. I think I'm ready to start making those choices. Not just because it's expected, but because it's what I want. To step into the unknown and see what happens. Chris looked at her, a feeling of admiration growing in his chest. Zara had always been strong, but now, she was embracing a new kind of strength. A strength that came from within, from the willingness to face the unknown and trust herself. It was a beautiful thing to witness, and Chris knew that whatever happened next, they would both be ready for it. They stood up from the bench, their conversation winding down as they prepared to head back inside. Chris couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for this moment, for Zara's willingness to open up and let herself be vulnerable. It wasn't easy, he knew, to step outside the confines of duty and tradition. But Zara was doing it, and in doing so, she was choosing her own path. As they walked back toward the palace, side by side, Chris felt a renewed sense of purpose himself. He had come here to represent humanity, but in these past few days, he had learned more about himself, about Zara, and about the power of choice than he ever could have imagined. The days that followed were filled with more quiet moments, but the connection between Chris and Zara deepened with every conversation. As they explored the more secluded corners of the palace, discussing everything from their cultures to the mysteries of the universe, a subtle shift occurred. It was as though they had moved past the formalities, and were now simply two individuals navigating the complexities of life together. One evening, as the golden light of the twin moons cast long shadows across the stone pathways, Chris found himself walking beside Zara once again. The atmosphere between them was comfortable, yet there was an unspoken tension in the air. They had talked about many things, but Chris realized that there was still one question lingering in the back of his mind, something he hadn't yet asked Zara. Zara, Chris began, his voice low. What do you see for yourself in the future? I mean, beyond the duties you've been given, beyond the expectations of your people. What do you truly want? Zara looked at him, her violet eyes reflecting the light of the moons, and for a moment, she said nothing. It was clear she was thinking, considering how to answer. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft yet filled with conviction. I want to find a way to bring more balance to my people. I want to show them that there is strength in understanding, in connecting with others. But I also want to live for myself, not just for my role as a leader. Chris nodded, his heart swelling with admiration for her honesty. He had seen the weight of leadership on her shoulders, and he could sense how much it cost her to admit that she, too, longed for something more than just the expectations placed on her. I get that, Chris said quietly. It's easy to get caught up in the roles we're expected to play. But it's hard, too, because those roles are important. They shape who we are. They give us purpose. Zara's expression softened, and she turned to face him fully, her steps slowing. Purpose, she repeated, as if testing the word. Yes, purpose is important. But sometimes I wonder if my purpose has already been chosen for me. What if there's something else, something more? I want to find that, Chris. I want to find what makes me truly feel alive, not just what my people need from me. Chris felt a pang of sympathy for her. He understood that yearning all too well. He had spent so much of his life doing what was expected of him, trying to live up to the standards of others. But Zara's words reminded him of the importance of listening to his own heart. You'll find it, he said, his voice steady and sure. I believe you will. You're already on the right path by asking yourself these questions. Not everyone does that. Zara smiled, the faintest glimmer of gratitude in her eyes. Thank you, Chris, she said softly. It means more than you know to hear you say that. For a moment, they simply stood there, side by side, in the peaceful silence of the garden. The wind rustled the leaves, and the stars above seemed to shimmer more brightly, as if echoing the stillness around them. Chris didn't know what the future held for either of them, but in that moment, he knew that they had made a real connection. It wasn't just the work they had done together, the formal exchanges of their cultures. It was something deeper, something that transcended the roles they had been given. It was the beginning of a true friendship, one that would last no matter where their paths took them. As they turned to continue their walk, Zara spoke again, her voice more thoughtful now. Do you think we're so different, Chris? Our species, I mean. Chris glanced at her, considering her question carefully. In many ways, yes, he said. We have different histories, different ways of thinking, different traditions. But I think, at the core, we're not so different. We both seek connection, understanding, and purpose. Zara nodded slowly, a look of quiet reflection on her face. Yes, she agreed. And that, perhaps, is the most beautiful thing of all. They continued walking in the peaceful stillness, their steps light, their bond stronger than before. Both had learned something valuable from the other, and in the quiet of the night, they both understood that they were no longer just representatives of their species, but two individuals who had found common ground in a vast and complex universe. As the weeks passed, Chris and Zara's friendship grew stronger. Their days were filled with more quiet conversations, shared reflections, and moments of understanding. It wasn't long before Zara began to show Chris the deeper aspects of her culture, things that were often reserved only for those closest to her. One afternoon, as they stood on a balcony overlooking the city, Zara turned to Chris with a thoughtful look in her eyes. There is a ceremony tomorrow, she said softly, her voice tinged with a hint of uncertainty. It is an important part of our tradition. I would like for you to attend. Chris raised an eyebrow, curious. A ceremony? What's it about? Zara hesitated for a moment before answering. It's a rite of passage for the leaders of our people. It symbolizes a renewal of our commitment to the values that guide us. It's deeply personal and significant. Chris nodded, understanding the gravity of the invitation. I'd be honored to attend, Zara. But I have to ask, why me? I'm not exactly one of your people. Zara smiled faintly, her violet eyes meeting his. Because you've come to understand us in a way few others have. You've listened, not just to our words, but to the heart of what we stand for. You've earned the right to witness this. Chris felt a wave of gratitude and respect wash over him. In a world so vast, with so many different cultures and traditions, Zara's words meant more to him than he could express. She had shared something precious with him, something beyond diplomacy or expectation. The ceremony the next day was held in a grand hall, its walls adorned with intricate symbols and patterns representing the rich history of the Lunaran people. The air was thick with a sense of reverence, and Chris felt a deep respect for the solemnity of the occasion. Zara stood at the front, her posture regal, her expression calm but focused. As the ceremony began, the room fell into complete silence. It was as if the very air around them held its breath, waiting for the moment to unfold. Chris watched as Zara and the other leaders performed the rituals, their movements precise and fluid. He could feel the weight of the ceremony, the deep sense of connection it forged between them and their ancestors, their culture, and each other. When it was Zara's turn, she stepped forward with grace, her presence commanding the room without a word. Chris could see the strength in her, the quiet confidence that radiated from her as she stood there. A leader among leaders. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and Chris saw something in Zara that he hadn't noticed before. It was a sense of peace, a quiet satisfaction in knowing she was fulfilling her purpose, not because it was expected, but because it was what she truly wanted. The ceremony continued, and as the leaders exchanged symbolic gifts, Chris felt a profound sense of connection, not just to Zara, but to the Lunaran people as a whole. He had come to understand their culture in a way that few outsiders ever would. The ritual was not just about tradition. It was about belonging, about understanding the deeper truths that guided their lives. As the ceremony concluded, Zara joined Chris once again, her face soft with the weight of the moment. "Thank you for being here," she said quietly. "It means more than you know." Chris smiled, touched by her sincerity. "I'm glad I could be here. It's an honor to witness something so meaningful." Zara's smile deepened, and she looked out over the city, her eyes reflecting the light of the setting sun. "This ceremony reminds me that we are all part of something greater. It's not just about the roles we play, but about the connections we make, the choices we make." Chris stood beside her, feeling the truth of her words settle in his chest. In that moment, he realized that Zara had taught him something he hadn't expected to learn. It wasn't just about diplomacy or leadership. It was about the quiet moments of understanding, the shared experiences that transcended the differences between them. As they stood there together, the city bathed in the golden glow of the evening light. Chris knew that their journey had only just begun. The road ahead was uncertain, but with Zara by his side, he felt ready to face whatever challenges the future might hold. They were no longer just an ambassador and a guide. They were two individuals, connected by the shared belief that understanding and compassion could bridge even the widest of gaps. And in that quiet moment, as the sun set over the city, they both understood that they were exactly where they were meant to be. The following days were filled with a sense of quiet anticipation as Chris and Zara grew more comfortable in each other's presence. They no longer felt like two representatives from distant worlds. Instead, they were simply two people, learning and growing through their shared experiences. The evening air in the garden had cooled, and the soft glow of the palace's lights illuminated their path as they walked side by side. Zara had invited Chris to join her for dinner that evening, a gesture that felt more personal than any formal gathering they had attended before. As they entered the dining hall, Zara's presence seemed to command the room. The Lunaran staff moved with grace and efficiency, setting the table and serving the dishes with an elegance that mirrored their queen's demeanor. Chris took a seat across from her, noticing how the soft light reflected off her silver hair, giving her an almost ethereal glow. Zara smiled at him as she sat down, the weight of the ceremony from earlier in the day still lingering in her eyes. "Thank you for being there today," she said, her voice calm but filled with gratitude. "It was an important moment for me, and having you there made it even more meaningful." Chris nodded, feeling the depth of her words. "It was an honor. I've never seen something so powerful, so full of tradition and meaning." The conversation drifted from the ceremony to lighter topics, and soon they were laughing together over stories of their respective worlds. Chris shared tales of Earth's more peculiar customs, and Zara, in turn, spoke of the Lunaran rituals that Chris had yet to experience. As they ate, Chris couldn't help but notice how comfortable he felt in Zara's presence. There was no pressure, no formality, just two people sharing a meal, and in that simple act, something profound was happening. The connection between them, once built on cultural exchange, had evolved into something deeper. It wasn't just about learning each other's ways. It was about understanding each other as individuals. "I've been thinking about something," Zara said after a while, her voice quieter now, a touch of seriousness returning to her tone. "Do you ever wonder, Chris, if we are truly capable of creating the world we want to live in? Or are we always bound by the expectations placed on us?" Chris took a moment to think before responding. He had often wondered about the same thing, especially after all his experiences in this vast, interconnected galaxy. "I think we're always bound by something," he said slowly. "Whether it's our past, our responsibilities, or even our own fears. But that doesn't mean we can't create something new. It's hard." Zara studied him for a moment, her violet eyes reflecting the flickering candlelight. "It is hard," she agreed. "But I believe that if we're willing to look beyond what's expected, if we're willing to take risks, we can create something that's truly ours. Something real." Her words hung in the air, and Chris felt a shift within himself. Zara wasn't just speaking about her own people or their traditions anymore. She was speaking about the future, about the choices they both had to make. "Maybe," Chris said thoughtfully, It's about embracing the unknown, even when it's scary. Zara smiled softly, her gaze never leaving his. Yes, she said. Maybe it's about that. For a long while, they sat in comfortable silence, the weight of their conversation lingering between them. Chris couldn't help but feel that, in that moment, they had both crossed a threshold into something new, something that neither of them could predict, but both were ready for. As the evening came to a close, Zara stood and walked to the balcony, her silhouette framed by the soft light of the stars outside. Chris joined her, standing quietly beside her as they gazed out over the city. The stars are beautiful here, he said after a long pause. Zara nodded. They've always been a reminder of how small we are in this vast universe, she replied softly, but also of how much we are capable of, how much we can achieve if we dare to reach beyond what we know. Chris looked at her, seeing a determination in her eyes that mirrored his own. He had come to this world with his own set of expectations, his own purpose. But here, with Zara, he was beginning to see that maybe, just maybe, the future wasn't something to fear. It was something to create, together. And in that moment, he felt a renewed sense of purpose, no longer just as an ambassador, but as someone ready to embrace the unknown with someone who shared his desire for change. They stood there together, in the silence of the night, knowing that their journey was far from over. But for the first time, Chris felt like they were both ready to face it, whatever it might bring. As the days turned into weeks, Chris and Zara's bond continued to grow. What had started as a diplomatic exchange had blossomed into a deep friendship, rooted in shared understanding and mutual respect. They had come to realize that despite the vast differences between their worlds, there were threads of commonality that wove them together. One evening, as the stars shimmered above, they found themselves in the quiet of the palace garden, their favorite spot. Zara had invited Chris to join her for a peaceful walk, away from the busy halls of the palace. As they walked side by side, the cool night air surrounding them, Zara spoke with a softness in her voice that Chris had come to recognize. Chris, I've been thinking a lot about what you said the other day, she began, her eyes not meeting his, but instead focused on the path ahead. About embracing the unknown. Chris turned to her, curious. What about it, he asked. I think I'm ready to step into that unknown, Zara said, her voice filled with a quiet confidence. Not just for my people, but for myself. I've always been bound by tradition, by duty. But I've come to realize that there's more to life than fulfilling the roles we're given. There's more to living than just doing what's expected of us. Chris smiled softly, feeling a deep sense of pride for her. Zara had always been strong, but in this moment, she was showing a different kind of strength, one that came from embracing change and the unknown. I think you've already made the hardest choice, Chris said, his voice steady with conviction. You've chosen to live for yourself, not just for your people. And that's something powerful. Zara stopped walking and turned to face him, her eyes meeting his for the first time in the conversation. There was a depth to her gaze, a vulnerability that had not been there before. Thank you, Chris, she said softly. You've shown me that there's more to life than just tradition. You've shown me that sometimes the path we're meant to take is the one that leads us into the unknown. Chris felt his heart swell at her words. In the quiet of the garden, with the stars shining down on them, he realized that they had both changed, not just as representatives of their worlds, but as individuals who had learned from each other and grown together. Zara's smile deepened, and she took a step closer to him. I want to know what it's like to live for myself, she said, her voice steady but filled with a new sense of purpose. And I want to know what it's like to make my own choices, even if it's scary. Chris nodded, feeling a sense of awe at the woman standing before him. I think you'll find that it's worth it, he said quietly. Choosing your own path, even when it's uncertain, is what makes life truly worth living. For a moment, they stood there in silence, the weight of their conversation settling between them. It was no longer just about their cultures or their responsibilities. It was about their shared journey into the unknown, into the future. The future that, together, they would navigate. As they continued walking, the quiet of the garden around them felt like a peaceful reflection of the change that had taken place between them. They were no longer just two people from different worlds. They were two people, ready to face whatever the future held, together. And for the first time since arriving on this distant planet, Chris felt truly at home, not just in the palace, but in the friendship he had found with Zara. The journey ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. They were both ready to face it, whatever it may bring.